Hi, everyone. On behalf of Creative Victoria and Arts Hub, welcome to today's Creative Exchange webinar, using social media to promote your creative business. While we're all joining from different locations today, I want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we each live and work. I'm on Dja Dja Wurrung country today in beautiful but very cold and stormy central Victoria, and I want to pay my respects to Jarrah elders, past and present, and also acknowledge any First Nations people who are on the call with us today. This webinar is taking place on Aboriginal land, and sovereignty has never been ceded. My name's Claire Phoebe. I'm the CEO of Creative Victoria. My preferred pronouns are she and her. I'm a cis white woman, short brown hair, wearing black glasses today. And also for Oz Music T-shirt Day, I'm wearing a Cash Savage and the Last Drinks T-shirt. And my thanks to Cash and the band for giving me what remains my most extraordinary post-COVID music moment to this day. A bit of housekeeping before we get started. This webinar is being live captioned. If you'd like to access the captioning, just select Show Captions from your Zoom menu, or if that doesn't work, then you can click the link in the chat. We're also recording this session today, so any questions that you ask will be part of the recording. The recorded webinar will be available through the Creative Exchange page on the Creative Victoria website and also on Arts Hub. We'll send out a survey following the webinar, so please do fill that in and let us know how we've gone and what you'd like to hear about us from in the future. Hashtags for today's event are hashtag CreativeVic and hashtag Creative Exchange. As always, we're very happy to be working in partnership with Arts Hub to bring you this Creative Exchange webinar. And social media is such a hot button topic. We all think we should be on socials. Some people are making a living out of working with social media. But what does it really look like to use social media as a tool to promote and grow your creative business? How do you find your audience? How do you get them to stick with you? And how do you make money with it? Today, our expert panel will share their insights into the complex and ever-changing social media landscape. Before I do a quick introduction of the panel, I need to let you know that there has been a late change of panel members. Unfortunately, John Burgess from Little Rocket is no longer able to be with us today, as he's got some sorry business, and our thoughts go out to John. However, we're very pleased to have his colleague Kelsey Dubar, Marketing and Events Manager at Little Rocket, who's going to share her social media experience in today's webinar. Kelsey will be joined by Atong Atem, an Ethiopian-born South Sudanese artist and writer living in Naarm. Atong works with portraiture, photography and storytelling. And then our panel is rounded out by Anna Horan, Head of Brand and Content at Rising Festival. Anna oversees all of Rising's content channels and creative, as well as merchandise and festival documentation. And of course, today's webinar will be moderated by Kate Mulqueen, who freelances as a social media advisor in the performing arts and is a regular performing arts reviewer for Arts Hub. Kate also manages social media and content for Fed Square, which is now part of the Melbourne Arts Precinct Corporation. While I'm here, I've been asked to give a quick plug to the new Creative Exchange podcast series. The podcast delves deeper into some of the themes that are explored on our webinars, and the first couple of episodes are available now. Catching Curveballs, looking at how creative organisations and individuals have innovated in the face of crisis or change, and the first in a two-parter, which is about the value of mentorships. So please do check them out. But now it's my pleasure to hand over to Kate Mulqueen to kickstart today's discussion. Thanks so much, Kate, and over to you.
Hello, hi everyone. As Claire has said, my name's Kate Mulqueen and I'll be moderating today's session. I'm really pleased to be able to be coming in from our Wurundjeri Wurrung country here in beautiful Naarm. And I have our fantastic panelists here, Atong, Kelsey and Anna, to share their insights. Social media is, as Claire said, a huge area that everyone's interested in, and I'm really interested to hear what everyone has to say. So as Claire mentioned as well, I do some freelancing in this space and it's my job, but I feel like I'm constantly learning and always have something to learn from other people, as I'm sure you'll find today as well. So what I might do is hand over to each of our panelists to introduce themselves and just say something in a short 2-minute spiel about who they are, what they do, and perhaps something about their personal views on social media. I might hand over to you, Atong, first.
Thank you, Claire. Hi, my name is Atong Atem. I'm also on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country in Naarm. I grew up on Ku-ring-gai country, central coast of New South Wales, but have been here for like 10 years, I think, doing my practice as a visual artist. My work is mostly photography based, a lot of studio photography, film, that sort of thing, and a lot of my visual art practice has sort of emerged from my own identity as a South Sudanese woman living in Australia as a migrant, and as a person who's interested in history. So it's been really interesting to be able to share that on social media and have access to a diaspora community. And I'm excited to delve into that as we chat today.
Thanks, Atong. And I might pass over to you, Anna, if you could introduce yourself as well.
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. My name's Anna Horan. So yeah, as was mentioned, I'm the head of brand and content at Rising. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're gathered on. Yeah, I'm currently on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country, but yeah, grew up on Wadawurrung country down in Geelong. Yeah, I suppose my role has really expanded in the time that I've been at Rising. At first, it was launching the brand into market when we didn't have a festival. So a lot of that was done through content and social media and building up that audience online before we could actually have a physical presence. And yeah, so I kind of have some strong views about how content can play a role in building your brand and connecting with audiences. But really it should come down to, who your audience is and, I suppose what the message you're trying to communicate and get across should be.
Thanks.
Over to Kelsey.
Kelsey, you're just on mute if you just want to take yourself off mute.
Hi, my name is Kelsey. I would also like to acknowledge the lands on which I'm joining from today, the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung, here in Naarm. As mentioned, I am the marketing and events manager at Little Rocket, filling in for my director today, John Burgess. Little Rocket is a First Nations full service creative and marketing agency. We're based in Brunswick. We cover design, audiovisual, event management, marketing, communications, art management, talent management, merchandising, animation, PR. There's a lot of talents in our team. It's pretty endless. I graduated from university with a Bachelor of Business degree, majoring in both marketing and accounting, which I was lucky enough to kind of land an internship straight into kind of a social media role where I advanced my career in marketing. Unfortunately, accounting has still not made my resume, so that's still just parked on the side. And I really enjoy my work-life balance. I align myself as well with the sports brand 2XU, where I've been an ambassador for them for about 3 years.
Thanks, Kelsey. That's great. I might just get started. We've got a lot to cover, so I wanted to talk about how each of you potentially got started. I might start with Atong, because as an artist, maybe tell your story about how you first got into social media and why you chose the channels that you chose to be on.
It's a great sort of point to start with, because I think my start with social media actually coincided with my start in terms of being like a emerging or practicing artist and delving into potentially becoming a full-time artist, which is what I do now. So I will say that my start was maybe easier than others, because I think I grew up quite immersed in internet culture and had a strong relationship with using the internet for more than just, say, research in school or whatever, and being part of communities that exist primarily, if not exclusively, online. So it was really natural for me to then use to extend that into the work that I was doing. Before this panel, I was actually thinking about how best to describe my relationship to social media as a visual artist and how I use it and what kind of tool it is for me. And I will say that I think primarily at the beginning anyway, it started off as like as an extension of, like, say, a visual diary. You know, it wasn't specifically initially to market anything or to showcase or you know, sell or promote. It was specifically to just have a place in which my art could exist when it wasn't, you know, in a gallery like once or twice every 3 years if I was lucky back then. And I think that really nurtured my relationship to it and allowed it to be an extension of my work rather than this really difficult, complicated thing that I was trying to wrestle with. Yeah, and I think so many communities exist online that it made it really easy for me as an artist to feel like there was a space that kind of existed to use social media as a tool, to not be drowned underneath the complexities and difficulties of it, and to adapt to it, and to also in some ways adapt my work to maybe internet ways of showing without necessarily compromising. So yeah, I think social media for me has been an extension of my practice rather than something that I've had to navigate per se.
And are there platforms that you specifically jumped on because they suit what you do, or how was that choice made?
Yes, the platforms. I think to begin with, I will say that I probably started showing my work when I first started studying art, which was, I think, 2011 or 12 is when I was at art school. So I don't think Instagram was a big thing there. I don't actually remember when Instagram started. So that was not a platform that I initially used. I initially was using things like Tumblr and creating these sort of free online blogs and sharing kind of inspiration as well as my own work. But because I'm a visual artist and because I primarily work with photography, Instagram was an incredibly easy and welcomed platform because it's designed to showcase images and specifically photos. And it also meant that I had that comfortability of showing works in progress and not feeling like it needed to be like a gallery of completed works. So I've gravitated towards Instagram, and to some extent I used Twitter as well, but that was more so to sort of talk ideas and to have dialogue, I suppose, about kind of larger things that exist in the art world. But yeah, I haven't really delved further than what suits visual art and what fits with the kind of visual art that I make, which is predominantly portraiture. So there's sort of, I think the algorithms changed to kind of prefer video maybe now, but Instagram loves faces and I make a lot of faces with my work. So it suited me really well.
I might throw it to Anna. You touched on it in your introduction about audiences, and how was that considered when Rising began, when you were deciding where to be, what platforms to engage with, and how to approach your strategy on social media?
Sure. So I guess when we first launched Rising, we did have kind of a legacy audience from Melbourne Festival days, but that was primarily, on our email list and that kind of thing. So we had to really build our other channels up from scratch in many instances. And yeah, I suppose take into consideration that there would be probably some significant attrition with the change, I suppose, in approach and what we were trying to do as a festival. And I guess, really thinking about what audiences exist in different spaces. So on Instagram, obviously, it's a much more visual place. There are a lot of artists and, I suppose, curious audiences looking to explore and find inspiration on that platform. Whereas, at the time, something like Twitter or now Threads is kind of where conversations are happening. Less kind of, I suppose, content sharing in that sense, more conversations. And then I suppose something like LinkedIn is really about, people are on there to kind of build their professional resumes and to connect with other people in the sector. So that's where we really focus, I suppose, our communications around who we are as a festival in terms of the art sector, our place in the arts ecology, and also as a place to work as well, and obviously to advertise things like jobs and that kind of thing. And there is crossover between the different platforms, but I think, thinking about who is actually on those platforms and what are they looking for is sort of drives the content that lives there.
Did you do any kind of benchmarking when you were starting about what kinds of accounts that you're looking at to perhaps draw from, or get a that you looked to that were kind of doing great stuff?
Yeah, I think at the time, for some channels we could kind of compare ourselves to the previous festival. I suppose it's a little different, at least when we're starting out, because we do operate on a yearly cycle. So obviously have peaks and troughs of when we're pushing out a lot of content. And it's really actually only after 3 years of having kind of, we've only technically had 2 festivals, not 3. So, but, kind of 3 full campaigns, and trying out a whole bunch of different content at those points, that we can actually compare year on year. And I think that is probably when you are looking at benchmarking, actually looking at similar periods that you can compare like for like to, and similar content and that kind of thing. So yeah, I hope that answers that question.
I'm curious, Kelsey, from an agency perspective, how do creative businesses differ in this space in terms of what they can do on social media? What's the kind of difference that you see, or how do you advise businesses who are starting off, or in terms of getting started in this space?
Yeah, so I think to really start off, it's about doing a bit of self-research and just knowing where what platforms you kind of want to promote your business on, and what aligns best with your goals and outcomes of your social media platforms. I know there's some businesses that thrive really well visually, and so they'd kind of lean towards that Instagram of bright colors and graphics, and using tone of voice and brand personality to really visualize and enable people to feel and resonate with that brand. Whereas some brands might be better off in terms of Facebook, where it's a bit more talking about the content and the educational pieces behind what you're needing to share. So Facebook's good at sharing kind of links and media articles and having that kind of ease of use in a more of a knowledgeable and explanatory kind of way than Instagram. So Facebook can be really prominent in regards to that kind of area of your work. And then obviously there's TikTok, which is really fun, engaging. You want to use tutorials, motion graphics, explainers, really get your face behind the brand, get other people generating that content and sharing that content too. So yeah, just depending on what your business goals are, you can really focus on those alignments of those different platforms and dive deeper into doing that research and creating mood boards and planning out how you're going to really develop those platforms to make sure that they project and portray exactly what your business is trying to achieve.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Kelsey. It's really interesting to hear that. TikTok's obviously a big player now, and as Atong mentioned before, there's rise of video, but it doesn't necessarily fit every business. And there's I guess that takes us into kind of resourcing. So for a creative business who's getting started out, how much time do you think, Kelsey, is kind of reasonable to spend? Let's say a business is quite a small business. How should it be kind of prioritized or manage that kind of time input and resourcing input?
Yeah, when you're starting off, it does take a bit more of your time than you probably would suggest it would. Just really taking moments to develop that content and that content creation. So it takes a bit of time for you to learn what your kind of brand colors are, what your tone of voice is, and developing those, like I said before, those mood boards. So you'd probably be on there like quite frequently, maybe daily, just touching in on that, because it will build into that personal growth and development of your business as you're starting off. Because I feel social media needs to come in there in those early days to progress with that business growth as you're developing. And Canva is obviously a really good tool to use for starting off with a business. It's got lots of different tools and options in there for you to get prompts and kind of templates to kind of get going. And it's kind of a good platform to just learn what you can do and what the abilities are there, which you can then take away and develop into your own content that is more unique to what you're looking for. And then it comes into a bigger picture of, you've got your content, you've got your design, but then you're looking into your copywriting. So you've got to copyright all your posts and align your tone of voice there and what you're trying to portray to your audience. So that takes some time to get all that right and pair that with all your different graphics and content. Then monitoring your channels and making sure that your audience isn't interacting in a way that you want them to interact. Having that community management there to make sure you can answer questions that come in, or respond to anything that maybe isn't quite favorable on that page, and just trying to work out how all that is going to be managed as a whole. Yeah, and then I guess those bigger campaigns, they take a lot of time to digest and develop, and there's a lot of time management across those as well. So it's a lot of time that does take up, and I think you need to make sure that you factor that in when you are kind of starting up that business and taking that time to put that aside and put the effort into your social media, because it is a really strong driver of success there too.
Atong, I just wanted to ask you from your perspective, how much time do you spend weekly, daily on social media?
That's a great question, because I do think that it's quite easy as an artist maybe, or as like a sole trader, or somebody who is like the kind of sole business operator. It is really easy to get caught up in it, especially because it's sort of an extension of our lives. I think at the beginning, it was quite intuitive, and I maybe posted quite a lot because I was excited to share things, because I was sharing things like process photos, I was sharing what I was working on, I was sharing, what I was researching at the time. And a lot of the people, my audience at the time, I suppose, were other artists and writers and, people in uni doing their masters or whatever. So there was a lot of space to sort of exchange, and it felt kind of easy and natural to post probably every day, maybe a couple of times a day. And over time, maybe because I got busier, or maybe because I got more intentional, I sort of limited it to, at most one post a day. I think once I became aware of the fact that there is an audience beyond people that I know personally, and they're interacting with this work and interacting with what I post, it sort of made sense to be mindful of how I was engaging with that audience and what I was sharing, without necessarily editing what I was sharing. And that meant maybe not overwhelming the feed with lots and lots of stuff, being maybe cautious of when I was posting, like say if I had an event, an upcoming exhibition or something, and I want people to come and I want them to be aware of the dates and the information, perhaps posting at like 2 o'clock in the morning isn't a great idea, because by the time people wake up the next morning, it will have been at the bottom of the feed and no one's going to get to it and no one will know. So, when are people likely to be looking at their phone? And it's usually while they're at work. So I'd be posting during the day for really important stuff. And I think now I definitely engage a lot less with social media, and predominantly use it to show, upcoming events or exhibition openings or whatever, which means that I'm probably a little bit even more so mindful of when I'm posting, because, it's sort of, the attention economy thing, right, where we're trying to establish how to grab people's attention and competing with millions of other things that are grabbing people's attention. And it is tough to talk about it quite practically in that way as an artist, because you want it to kind of be flowy and sort of natural and authentic. But I do think that you can be mindful of ways to interact with this tool whilst also being authentic to yourself. And that means that if I'm going to post about, say, an upcoming exhibition, I'm going to talk about it as if I were talking to a group of friends about it, but still include the information and post it at a time when people are most likely to look at it. So yeah, it doesn't have to be kind of methodical in the you know, the content, so to speak, but being mindful of that. So to answer your question, I probably post maybe a couple of times a fortnight because there's not something on all the time. Yeah.
And Anna, from the perspective of Rising, I guess it's a big organization, not just a sole trader, you know, or sole artist. How do you manage that resourcing or weighing up the kind of cost benefit of like the time, that the staff time that it takes to kind of plan social media and the types of content that might take longer to create versus the outcome or benefit of that content and the purpose or value of it?
Yeah, I suppose we are a big organization, but pretty small team for content. So we have someone who's their job is dedicated to running all of our channels. We have quite a few of them, and they're obviously quite essential to our marketing efforts and growing our audiences and that kind of thing. And that will expand when we get into like our peak periods, like we bring on a lot of freelancers to capture content for us. We'll have a dedicated social person who'll be out there capturing and posting content as it's happening. And I pretty much check in on it still, at least twice a day. At this point, it's quite quiet because we haven't announced anything yet. But yeah, we do still have things out in market. Like we just had the Art Trams EOI, which went out. And so just making sure that we're monitoring comments and answering any questions and that kind of thing that comes off the back of that. But I suppose from a kind of a long-term strategy kind of planning perspective, I would recommend spending a decent chunk of time really thinking about what your brand strategy is. Because that will, it should inform what your content that you're posting is going to be. And that's really just, I think, you know, starting off with thinking about 4 or 5 values, like looking at your past work, looking at what you want to be talking about, what you want to be promoting and that kind of thing. And really just, I think, solidifying, okay, these are the key things I want to be talking about. And then thinking about who your audience is, who you want to be reaching if you don't already, you're not already reaching those audiences, and what interests them and what resonates with them. And then based on those 2 things, like actually writing down, okay, what are some goals that I can have around my content? It might be that you could have a long-term goal that's over a number of years of like building up to 5,000 followers or something like that. But you could also have a much more short-term goal that might only be a few months or up to 12 months. And really thinking about, okay, I want to increase, making them smart. So specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and timely. So, you know, I want to increase my followers from 1,000 to 2,000 on Instagram by November 30, 2024. And I think with those kind of parameters, like written down, it will become really clear to you, like it will come into focus what kind of content you should be making, what channels you should be focusing on. If you're just starting out, you probably only want to do 1 or 2. I can tell you that managing upwards of 8 channels is a lot of work and requires a lot of planning and a lot of money to make some quality content that goes out at a regular basis. So yeah, I think start small, but really like put down on a piece of paper what your goals are, what your values are, and who your audience is. And that's the best advice I can probably give to someone starting out.
And Kelsey, I'm curious as well from your perspective, advising other businesses and working with other businesses about return on investment. Like, how do you measure the success of social media? How does it translate from followers to actual business success?
Yeah, so I guess the return on investment is something that will need to be kind of closely monitored, but it will take some time. It's not just going to be an instant result, and you're not just going to start your social media and just hope that you're just going to get a whole bunch of followers, a whole bunch of customers come through buying your products. It's all about the journey, and it's about learning yourself as well. So just making sure that kind of like what Anna was saying before, you kind of set down those goals. So you've got those achievements along your way. So that revenue stream will start coming in at some point. And whether that's 6 months down the track, whether that's 12 months down the track, it's all about the progress. So if you're keeping that content regular, if you're talking to the right audiences and really focusing on the content you're putting out there and the goals that you're aiming for, the revenue will start to come as you progress. So I think it's challenging, and it's something that you do want as an instant gratification of a self-achievement for your social media channels and for your business. But yeah, it's putting even just little things like putting link in bios and tagging products in your posts and doing paid advertising. All those things, they all bulk up, and they work together to give you that revenue stream. So yeah, I think taking it time and just focusing on, if you have the money to put behind it, put the money behind it, and focus on those paid channels and building that demographic in that regard, because they are going to be your prospective customers, and they're the customers that you might not have had aligned in your initial goals, and then you can build, and the stream will become bigger for those campaigns that you run, such as like recently, like the Black Friday sales and things like that. You're just getting ads and ads and ads from people, and it's all about click here to receive 60% off, or click here to get a free sample with your next purchase, or those small advertising streams are really vital in driving that revenue too, in terms of that kind of paid versus organic content that you're putting out. And from a metric kind of point of view, really gathering those metrics and analysing your reports, and month by month, just seeing where the demographics are, where the audience is coming from, what content's performing well, what impressions you're getting, so that you can really work through all those analytics to strengthen your next campaign, or strengthen the next social media content that you're developing, so that you can build bigger revenue streams for yourselves and reach larger audiences. And that organic content is always going to sit there, and it's going to be consistent, and it's going to be always on content, which is telling your brand story. But to keep driving that and to keep building it and to getting that end result that you really want, sometimes it does cost a little bit more than what you intended, and those that advertising needs to be really strong and quite powerful in what you're aiming for. So yeah, really looking at not just the organic but also the paid, and then how you can create bigger campaigns to drive that revenue as well.
Anna, from your perspective, how do you see the difference between the paid digital advertising that can be done on Instagram and Facebook and these channels versus the organic posts? How do you see the difference?
Yeah, I suppose I like to think about it as brand building versus, I suppose, sales activation, or the money making part. And you need to put money behind both of those things. But primarily organic content, it should be about brand building. So really speaking to those values, I suppose building up the associations you want people to have about who you are and what you're doing. And then in terms of the paid, that's really about reaching as many people as possible. But it also depends on where you are in terms of the marketing funnel. So a basic marketing funnel is awareness, consideration, and conversion. And awareness is kind of the top of the funnel. It's the mass market, reaching as many people as possible. Consideration is getting people to consider your brand. They know who you are, and they're kind of weighing up their options. And then conversion is about actually making the sale or getting them to convert into becoming an email subscriber or something like that. So yeah, in terms of awareness, that's always going to be brand building. And yeah, your goal there is to reach as many people as possible, so people actually know you exist. And also building up those positive associations you want about how your brand is perceived. And then, yeah, the sales kind of revenue part of it starts to come into play in terms of consideration and conversion. So yeah, actually putting a product in front of someone and showing them the benefits, the features, the emotional payoff that they'll get from, buying your art or coming to an event and that kind of thing. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of, there is a bit of a trickle down from awareness through to conversion, and you won't see an awareness ad turn into a sale necessarily, but that's not what its job is. That part comes later. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Anna. And Atong, from your perspective as an artist, how has social media translated to your success as an artist, as selling artwork and making your living as an artist?
Yeah, it's a multi-pronged thing, I would say. I think it can be tricky to sort of translate direct kind of, I don't know, sales, or to be able to really specifically see a tangible translation into, my livelihood, because the majority of people that are buying my work are not my followers for the most part, because the work isn't, a t-shirt or something that sort of, not everybody wants to buy a, 2-meter photograph of my face painted blue, but those that do often will see my work online first, often to the point of, I'll often get like a call from my gallery after I've posted a work that hasn't been shown or displayed. I don't even know what size it's going to be. And it's just like, this is something that I'm working on. And they'll say somebody's called or emailed because they want to buy that. And it's like, well, it's not ready. So it is really similar to what Anna's saying about that sort of awareness thing. I think the main space that social media occupies for me as an artist in terms of a marketing tool is to create awareness, for people to be aware of my existence as an artist and the kind of work that I make, as well as to also advertise, say, exhibition openings or talks or, events that people can attend. And then the other part of it also is to kind of, I think for me anyway, it's been a really great space to see what is happening that I can have access to, because I can't open the Guardian app and know that there's a residency or whatever. So creating an arts or being part of an arts community. And also I think the third and kind of the most tangible thing in my experience has been having other larger platforms, say Rising, for example, talk about what I've done with them on their social media channels, which then kind of does the trickle down. It's the only place that trickle down economics is really visible, isn't it? Because then they'll, follow me, and now they've got an awareness of me as an artist and what I do. So yeah, it can kind of be discouraging because there's sort of that push for more and more followers, but what does that translate to? And I will say that for me as an artist, that a lot of people who maybe started following me 5-10 years ago, those sort of relationships or those channels have only really eventuated recently, whether it be major institutions that saw me because something, somewhere I posted something or someone shared something of mine, and, there's an emerging young artist who lives all the way over in Melbourne or whatever, we're paying attention to her. Let's see where she goes. And then years later, it's like, okay, great. I'm in this incredible group show in a major institution because they've been able to follow my career trajectory. So in that way, it's like, it's really intangible, but I do think it's extremely important, especially now, and especially with an extremely global art market. It's not sort of enough, I guess, to just be local, unless that's what you want. And the only way really to reach those interstate and international audiences and to show your presence is to be on social media. Yeah, I don't want to ramble too much, but yeah, I think that's an easy question.
Great. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I've got and it's one of the questions here has talked about tools and kind of what kind of tools to use for planning. But I guess as a broader question, you know, they've mentioned Loomly, Hootsuite, or Planable for scheduling. But are there other tools that each of you would recommend that are free potentially to help with video editing or photo editing or planning or anything like that? I'll start with you, Tong, because you're on my screen.
So the different tools.
Any tools that you might use.
I think there's a lot of advantage to using tools like Hootsuite, for example, which is one that I've used in the past. Lots and lots of advantages, especially if you are the business as an individual, or if you have a small team or a limited budget. It can be really, really great to have one day a week per se, as opposed to every single day of the week where you sit down and you open up Hootsuite and you schedule all your posts for the week. I think, yeah, it was really useful when I was really, really engaging. And I will say that the reason that maybe I can be less active on social media now is because I spent so much time cultivating a following and creating sort of an awareness. Yeah, I put in the hard yards and I can sort of rest a little bit. Yeah, I think those tools are really, really useful. And I think they're really necessary at the beginning if you have a lot of other priorities. That being said, it can also be really fun if you enjoy it to be spontaneous and to make like a story as an artist specifically of, say, like, I'm in the studio right now and this, excuse me, this interesting thing came out of this, you know, experimentation that I'm doing. And I do think audiences really, really, really love seeing what I'm doing outside of just telling them where to go to see my work. Audiences love when I'm, I don't know, going on a walk or whatever, and I'm like, this is a photo of me in the garden, because it feels like they're not following, excuse me, they're not following a product. They're not engaging with like a abstract concept. They're following an artist and her journey as she grows and as she kind of establishes herself and as her work grows and changes. So for artists who are sort of the product, you as a person can kind of feel like a product. I do think even if you use the tools, it's really important to make it real as possible, so that one, you don't lose yourself in the realm, and two, so that you kind of have a kind of solid relationship with what you're doing and what you're using social media for. So yes to the tools, but don't let it get draggy and boring.
Yeah, fair enough. Kelsey, you mentioned Canva before. Are there any other tools that you would recommend people use, particularly free tools?
There's a few scheduling platforms out there that are good to like kickstart, just to kind of get your planning in place, so you can schedule in your posts and your copy and all your hashtags, and kind of do that all in advance, so that you can do it a week, 2 weeks in advance, a month in advance. So that kind of helps you settle, so you don't have to be on it every single day, and you know it's just going to roll out with ease. So there's a few scheduling platforms out there that are free and are free to use. And I do know that HubSpot do have a few like social media templates and scheduling templates that you can download and copy across to use yourself, which I found very beneficial, and kind of calendar layouts, and you can get key social dates for each month, like if it's World Bring Your Dog Day to work or something like that. So you can be like, oh, it's a fun day, maybe I'll do a fun social post on that, things like that. So yeah, there's quite a few scheduling ones out there, and I would also recommend Canva, like I mentioned before, because it's just a whole world of creativity in Canva. And with social media, you can edit photos, you can use different text, you can use different colorways, you can crop things, you can use they've got AI tools in there now that you can use as well, animations, GIFs, you can do all sorts of stuff in there. So it's a really good hub to express your creativity and to really get started in that space as you start to develop your brand and your social tools.
And Anna, I'm curious from your perspective, any tools that you would recommend, free tools that people can use?
Yeah, I suppose Vimeo is also is a free video editing software. Canva also has video editing now, I've seen. I would also honestly say that your phone is a really powerful device, and the photography it's capable of and the editing software that's already built in is incredible. So yeah, I think it's just looking up some basics in photography in terms of how to frame a photo, rule of thirds, and then actually looking into what does exposure mean? What is contrast? All of those things. You can have take some really beautiful photography and edit it directly on your phone, and that applies to video as well. And then I think TikTok and Instagram also have some really incredible editing tools built into the apps themselves. And they also have lots of templates that you can play with. I think you can get a little bit carried away or overwhelmed by the idea of filters and effects and that kind of thing. But if you're just sticking to the video part of it, it can be really simple to get the hang of. And I think if you're a little afraid to do it on your kind of public facing accounts, you can always start just kind of a burner test account that's private, that no one can see, just to kind of play around with some of those features and see how they publish to a feed. Because I think that is really the best advice. And, I've talked to lots of people at TikTok and that kind of thing about how do you make exciting, engaging content and that kind of thing. And their number one piece of advice is to just try things and get it out there and see what your community on there actually responds to. Because there is also, I think, you don't have to be super polished these days. It used to feel like you had to really bring your A game and have the most stylized shoot. But we're actually seeing, because of the rise of TikTok, that kind of authentic shot on the fly, kind of behind the scenes content really resonating with people because it feels so real. So yeah.
It's really good advice. It's really good advice. Now, Atong has to leave in a couple of minutes, so I just wanted to direct a question that comes from the audience to you. It's from, this gentleman says, I'm an artist. My main social media account is Instagram. Should I be using a creative account? What are the advantages? I'm not sure if you use a creative account, Atong, or what your view is.
I did use a creative account for a while. I think the only advantage at the time was that it allowed link in bio before that was available to more people. But I don't think it's necessary. I actually think, speaking as someone who engages and follows other artists and businesses and so on, the things that I kind of pay attention to is I do notice that if I see what looks like a business kind of structure on an artist or an individual's kind of social media page, I assume maybe that it's less personal or something, and which can sometimes be a drawback. Sometimes that's a great advantage, especially if you're, say, a photographer and you're advertising your service as a photographer. But as a visual artist, I think that we are lucky that we have the freedom to be able to sort of dictate the rules for engagement with our work and in how we share it. So yeah, I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think that the advantages that it offers are really that awesome. It's the ability to maybe see more metrics, which, I mean, the metrics that you get to see already on Instagram just for having an account are really, really useful. But I would suggest trying it and seeing if it feels better. I think, to kind of go off what you had said, Anna, about having a burner account, I think that is really, really useful. And I didn't necessarily have a burner account. I just kind of had no followers for ages. So that gave me the freedom to play around with different formats, to see what looked good on my page and what didn't, to see if I needed to be like really like structured or if I needed to break it up with personal things. And yeah, I think trialing things and seeing what works for you, but also what you think looks good, is a really, really good idea.
I'll say, let you go, Atong, because I know you have to go. Thanks so much. Now, this question has come from another person. I might direct this to you, Kelsey. I have different identities, artist and publisher, and have 2 Instagram accounts and 1 Facebook, but there's overlap, which I try to manage. It feels difficult to do that now, as while some followers are the same, I feel I'm reaching a different audience with each of them. Would it be better to just have 1 account?
There are still benefits of having 2, Facebook and Instagram. They do differ in terms of, it does differ in terms of your followers, but also in terms of your advertising streams as well. So if you are going down that kind of paid advertising route, those targeted audiences that you can build on both Facebook and Instagram, you can divert them and you can make them quite different. And same with your content. When you post on Instagram compared to Facebook, you can divide that content up and make it quite unique to each platform. If it's becoming that you're feeling like your followers are the same, that's not a problem. And if your content's the same, I don't think that's a problem either. You're still putting that content out there and you're still getting that outreach double the amount than you are if you just had that single platform. So if it's not taking up any more of your time or energy to create the content for both platforms, I definitely keep them both there, because they're both still very valid and they're both still quite high value platforms for social media. A lot of people saying Facebook is a lot quieter and it is quieting down and it's not as prominent as, say, Instagram, but there's still a lot of people on there and there's still a lot of people that use Instagram versus Facebook. So your audiences will be slightly different still on both those platforms. So I would recommend keeping them both. Just keep that content the same if that's going to make it easier for you.
And there's a question about Threads, and Anna, you mentioned Threads before. This person has said, what is the best thing about using Threads? Who do you reach that's different from Instagram?
Yeah, I suppose one of the reasons why we still have our Twitter, though we're slowly, well, I refuse to call it X, slowly moving away from it, is the fact that there are a lot of, I suppose, arts journalists and people within the sector there. There are still conversations that are happening. And yeah, I think the thing about Threads is that while I think a lot of people are like, what's the point? It's like nothing special. It's exactly Twitter or whatever. I think that's probably why it's going to eventually take off, is the fact that people will just flee from X and be able to have the exact same experience that they had on that platform onto Threads. So while I think it's like taking a little while to take off, the fact that people could instantly gather thousands of followers because of the crossover with Instagram, yeah, I think people will go there for different content than Instagram. I think it will become the place where, yeah, much like Twitter was back in its heyday, a conversation and discussion platform.
This is a very, we've only got 1 minute left to answer a very big question, but one has come through about, do any of the panelists have an opinion on using AI-led content for social media for brand business? And this person feels unsure about this space. Do you have any thoughts on this, Anna?
Yes. Yeah, I think from an art making perspective and putting original artwork into AI, that is ethically not even ambiguous. I think it's kind of wrong. But in terms of marketing and that kind of thing, it is a really useful tool. And I have personally used it in copywriting. It can be a really great starting point, like dumping a whole bunch of thoughts or condensing a 2,000 words into a 200-word post. It can be really powerful in that sense of something that would have taken you 2 or 3 hours to do and think about and really kind of drain your brain on. It can do in literally under a second. So yeah, in that sense, I think it can be useful for non-art making. And I think we'll be seeing it more and more. Yeah.
And I might just ask you both quickly for your top tip to close on. Maybe I'll throw to you, Kelsey, first.
I think with social media, it's all about just letting your creativity flow. Just open up, just let it flow out. Just get those ideas out, get those mood board concepts out. Speak true to you, what you want to see out there. Just trust yourself and don't be shy, and really express what you want to see in your brand or your business. And yeah, just go out there and do it. I think a lot of people do get a bit worried, and there's a lot of and ahhing and trying to hide behind a brand or hide behind a surface, but there is a lot of authenticity out there now, and people want to be able to relate to your brand. So I think, yeah, just go out there and do it. Do what you want to do, be creative, get those colors out there and enjoy it. It's a really fun journey and a fun pathway to grow.
Anna, yours?
Yeah, I semi-cheated and saw someone asked a question about burnout and social media, which, having worked in this space for a really long time, yeah, resonates with me, and the needing to turn off and disengage from it all. I probably don't have specific tips and tricks for that, but I did recently watch a great, essentially a TED Talk, but it was for the Adobe Creative Conference. I've forgotten what it's actually called. But there's a creator called Karen X Cheng, and her whole talk is about, yeah, staying true to yourself as an artist, building your following, but then also taking care of yourself. And yeah, so I highly recommend watching that.
Thank you both. I'll turn to Claire, I think it is, to follow up with the closing remarks. Thank you.
I know it's actually me, Madeline Swain. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Kate. I'm Madeline. I'm the managing editor at Arts Hub. We're coming to the end of our time now. So on behalf of the teams at Arts Hub and at Creative Victoria, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. And I'd like you to join me in thanking our panel, Anna, Kelsey and Aton, who have already gone. And thank you again, Kate. And thank you, everybody, for your questions. I'd just like to note that there were quite a few coming in at the end about how to handle negative feedback and trolling. And that's such a huge topic that we really don't have time to cover it today, but we will be putting some resources into the follow-up article after this webinar, so look out for that. And if you haven't done yet, don't forget that you can catch up on the 4 previous webinars via artshub.com.au or Creative Vic's website, and you can track them down on YouTube too. And this one will be available to view shortly. And as Claire mentioned at the beginning, we've also now launched our associated podcast series, and you can see episode 1 and the first part of episode 2, available now to listen to on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And to find out about any upcoming events in the Creative Exchange series, please subscribe to the Creative Victoria e-newsletter or follow the organisation on social media. And do remember to use those hashtags. I think they were put into the chat earlier, the hashtag Creative Vic and the hashtag Creative Exchange ones. And please do complete the feedback survey, which helps us with our next webinars. Thanks again to everybody for joining us today, and we'll see you all next time.